Ever wondered how many years in prison a baby could rack up? No? Just me? Okay, well, to answer my own question, I spent the last week binge-watching Family Guy and tallying up Stewie's crimes. And let me tell you, this diaper-wearing psychopath makes Al Capone look like a saint. By the time I finished, my calculator had smoke coming out of it. Stewie's rap sheet is so long it makes War and Peace look like a pamphlet. Want to know just how bad it is? Stick around, and I'll show you why Stewie Griffin should be serving roughly 7,600,000 years behind bars. Yeah, you read that right. Millions. Office years. Ever wonder what happens when you give a baby a participation medal? Apparently, in Stewie Griffin's case, it leads to arson. Yeah, you heard that right. Our favorite diabolical infant decided to throw the mother of all tantrums, and the Griffin house paid the price. Picture this. Little Stewie, probably still rocking a onesie, loses his tiny mind over a participation medal. Now, most kids might throw their toys or scream bloody murder, but not our Stewie. No, he decides to go full-on pyromaniac. Before you know it, the Griffin house is lit up like a bonfire on steroids. But here's where things get really messed up. Chris, poor, simple Chris, is still inside the house as it goes up in flames.
Oh my God, Chris is still in there. Somebody save Chris.
Can you imagine being trapped in a burning building because your baby brother decided to play amateur arsonist? Talk about family drama. Now, you might be thinking, how does a baby even start a fire? Well, apparently, Stewie's tiny hands are just as adept at striking matches as they are at building doomsday devices. As the flames start licking up the walls, you've got to wonder if Peter left his lighters lying around again, or if Stewie's been sneaking cigarettes behind the playground. Here's a fun fact for you. Turns out, toddlers and fire are about as good a combination as pineapple on pizza. Who would have guessed, right? Studies show that kids often start fires out of curiosity or to express anger. So, next time your toddler has a meltdown, maybe hide the matches. Just saying. As the inferno rages on, you can practically hear Chris's screams echoing through the neighborhood. Smoke billows from the windows, and I'm betting the neighbors are rethinking their decision to live next to the Griffins. I mean, between Peter's shenanigans and now Stewie's pyrotechnics, it's like living next to a disaster waiting to happen. Now, here's where it gets really wild. The fire marshal's report, and I swear I'm not making this up, actually attributes the cause of the fire to a vengeful infant. Can you imagine being the poor sap who had to write that report? Yeah, boss, it looks like the fire was started by a baby. I bet that guy's still in therapy. As the heat rises and the flames spread, you've got to wonder what's going through Stewie's mind. Is he cackling maniacally, planning his next diabolical scheme? Or is he just sitting there, sucking his thumb, completely oblivious to the chaos he's causing? Now, here's where things get interesting. In Rhode Island, where our favorite dysfunctional family resides, the age of criminal responsibility is 18. That means Stewie should be in the clear, right? Wrong. Turns out our little evil genius might be too smart for his own good. Because of Stewie's exceptional intelligence, I mean, the kid builds time machines for fun, there's a chance he could be tried as an adult. And if that happens, our diapered delinquent could be looking at up to 20 years in the slammer. Can you imagine Stewie in prison? He'd probably take over the place in a week. Victory shall be mine, echoing through the cell blocks. But let's be real for a second. Even if Stewie somehow dodged jail time, he'd definitely be in for some serious therapy. I'm talking years of counseling to unpack all that rage. Maybe they could pair him up with Stewie from the evil universe. Now that would be a therapy session I'd pay to see. Just when you thought Stewie's criminal career couldn't get any more twisted, our diabolical infant decided to expand his empire into the world's oldest profession. Yep, you heard that right. Stewie Griffin, the baby who's barely out of diapers, became the world's youngest pimp. I guess when you've already committed arson, the next logical step is to run a brothel, right? It all started innocently enough. Well, as innocent as anything involving Stewie can be. He and Brian decided to open a quaint little bed and breakfast. Sounds harmless, doesn't it? But faster than you can say giggity, their cozy B&B took a sharp turn into the seedy underbelly of Rhode Island's sex trade. Before you knew it, Stewie had recruited local women faster than a talent scout at a desperate housewives convention. His crib became command central for what he euphemistically called adult sleepovers. And let me tell you, the clients were lining up around the block. I mean, who wouldn't want to get their jollies at a brothel run by a baby? It's like the setup for a joke so dark, it makes Cole look pale. Now, you might be wondering, where was Brian's moral compass during all this? Well, apparently, it was spinning faster than a stripper on a pole. As the profits started rolling in, our favorite talking dog seemed to forget all about ethics. I guess money really does talk louder than morals, even for man's best friend, but here's where things get really messed up. You see, in the real world, cases of children involved in sex crimes often reveal a disturbing trend. Many of these situations are linked to exploitation and trafficking. It's the kind of thing that makes you want to take a long shower and then hug your kids. The fact that Family Guy plays this for laughs is, well, let's just say it's not everyone's cup of tea. Legal experts have weighed in on this unprecedented case of infant pimping. And let me tell you, they're scratching their heads harder than a flea-ridden dog. One expert said, and I quote, "Such a case would be highly unusual and likely to attract significant media attention." No kidding, Sherlock. I can see the headlines now. Baby runs brothel. Parents shocked to learn he can walk. As the stakes rose higher than Stewie's blood pressure during one of his tantrums, the authorities started to close in. I mean, it's not like you can hide a brothel forever, especially when your madam is still drinking from a sippy cup. The law was coming for Stewie, and this time, not even his stuffed bear Rupert could save him. In Rhode Island, where our pint-sized pimp was operating, prostitution is about as legal as using performance-enhancing drugs in the Tour de France. If Stewie were to be charged, he could face up to 5 years in prison for running a brothel. That's right, 5 years. By the time he got out, he'd be old enough for kindergarten. But here's the kicker. Stewie's criminal career is just getting started. This whole brothel business? It's like the appetizer in a 7-course meal of felonies. Our baby-faced menace to society is just warming up. And let me tell you, what's coming next makes his pimping days look like a gentle game of peekaboo. Ever wondered what happens when a toddler's tantrum involves nuclear weapons instead of just throwing toys? Well, our favorite criminal mastermind in diapers, Stewie Griffin, is about to show us. And let me tell you, it's not pretty. Remember how I said Stewie was just warming up? Well, our little psychopath decided to skip the terrible 2s and jump straight into the thermonuclear 3s. His quest for world domination took a turn so dark, it makes his previous crimes look like a gentle game of peekaboo. Picture this: Copenhagen, known for its charming streets and delicious pastries, suddenly vanishes in a mushroom cloud. Half of Europe follows suit faster than you can say, nap time. And there's Stewie perched on his high chair, his chubby little finger hovering over the big red button like it's a squeaky toy. Now, you might be wondering, how does a baby even get access to nuclear launch codes? Well, apparently, it's easier than you'd think. I asked some experts, and they told me that these days obtaining nuclear codes is about as complicated as ordering a Happy Meal. It's a terrifying thought, isn't it? The fate of the world in the hands of someone who still needs help wiping their own bottom. As Stewie giggles maniacally, world leaders are scrambling like headless chickens. Can you imagine that emergency UN session? Item 1 on today's agenda: how do we stop this homicidal infant? I bet that's a sentence they never thought they'd have to say. But here's the kicker. While the grown-ups are busy pointing fingers and arguing over whose turn it is to change Stewie's diaper, our pint-sized terrorist is racking up a body count that would make most serial killers green with envy. Cities are falling faster than Stewie's bedtime, and the death toll is rising higher than a toddler on a sugar rush. Now, let's talk about the legal implications of Stewie's little temper tantrum. According to international laws, acts of terrorism involving weapons of mass destruction can lead to some pretty severe penalties. We're talking life imprisonment, or even the death penalty in some places. But how do you sentence a baby? Do you give him life without the possibility of parolee, or just take away his binky? If we were to add up all the charges, multiple counts of using weapons of mass destruction, crimes against humanity, and probably jaywalking, because why not at this point, Stewie would be looking at about 7,600,000 years behind bars. That's a lot of timeouts. But here's the thing. Stewie's actions in the show are more than just a toddler having a bad day. They're a satirical take on how easy it is to obtain nuclear codes and the global impacts of nuclear warfare. It's like the writers of Family Guy looked at the world and thought, you know what would make this situation even more absurd? If we put a baby in charge of the nukes. And in true Family Guy fashion, they've managed to turn something as horrifying as global nuclear warfare into a punchline. It's the kind of dark humor that makes you laugh and then immediately question your moral compass. You thought Stewie's nuclear shenanigans were bad? Well, hold on to your sippy cups, because this pint-sized psychopath's got more tricks up his onesie sleeves. While most toddlers are busy building towers with wooden blocks, our favorite criminal mastermind in diapers has been constructing an arsenal that would make even the most hardened arms dealers do a double take. Picture this. You're babysitting little Stewie Griffin, and you decide to peek into his toy chest. Instead of finding stuffed animals and plastic trucks, you're greeted by a collection that would make the military-industrial complex blush. We're talking micro Uzis, grenade launchers, and everything in between, all conveniently sized for those tiny hands. But here's the kicker. This isn't just a case of a kid with an overactive imagination and some really convincing toy guns. No, no, no! Stewie's nursery has become a full-blown weapons depot. We're talking about real, honest-to-goodness firearms that could make Swiss cheese out of the neighborhood in seconds flat. Now, you might be wondering, how did a baby even get his hands on all this heat? Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Gun experts are scratching their heads, utterly baffled by how a toddler who's barely mastered walking managed to amass such an impressive collection. One expert was quoted as saying, "I've seen some strange things in my time, but a baby with trigger discipline, that's a new one." Of course, this being the Griffin household, chaos is never far behind. Picture poor, unsuspecting Peter mistaking a grenade for a rattle. One minute he's trying to entertain his son, the next he's diving for cover as the living room turns into a war zone. It's like a twisted version of Peekaboo, where the surprise is shrapnel. Meanwhile, the ATF agents are having a field day with this case. Can you imagine the briefing? All right, team, today we're raiding a crib. I bet that's not something they covered in training. They're probably debating whether to bring in the SWAT team or call in the Paw Patrol for backup. But let's get down to the nitty-gritty, shall we? In Rhode Island, where our favorite animated family resides, it's about as illegal as it gets for a minor to own or use firearms. And Stewie? Well, he's not just crossing the line, he's obliterating it with a rocket launcher. Let's take a quick inventory of Stewie's toy collection, shall we? We've got an M16A1, perfect for those long-range tantrums. An M3 grease gun, for when the regular baby oil just won't do. A Winchester Model 1200 Defender shotgun, because sometimes you need to defend your territory in the sandbox. A micro Uzi, for those quick diaper changes, and a Par Ordnance P1445 pistol, when you need to make a point during playgroup. Now, I know what you're thinking. Surely they can't throw a baby in jail, right? Well, buckle up, because Rhode Island law doesn't mess around when it comes to illegal weapons possession. For each of those firearms Stewie's got stashed away, he's looking at a potential sentence of 50 years in prison and a $50,000 fine. That's $10,000 per weapon, folks. At this rate, Stewie's college fund is going straight to the state coffers. Of course, in the wacky world of Family Guy, all of this is played for laughs. The show's creators clearly get a kick out of the sheer absurdity of a baby with enough firepower to start a small war. It's all part of that dark, twisted humor that keeps us coming back for more. But here's where things get a bit sobering. In the real world, cases of children involved with weapons often end in tragedy. It's a stark reminder that while Stewie's exploits might be good for a chuckle, the reality of minors having access to firearms is no laughing matter. If you thought Stewie's weapons cache was disturbing, wait till you hear about his kill count. How many lives can a baby take before nap time? Let's just say Stewie's making serial killers look like amateurs, and he hasn't even started preschool. Now, I'm not saying Stewie's the kind of kid you'd want babysitting your children, but he's certainly got a unique set of skills. And by skills, I mean an insatiable bloodlust that would make Hannibal Lecter blush. This diaper-wearing demon has racked up a body count that's higher than his age. And remember, he's still counting his age in months. But here's where things get really wild. We're not just talking about a few unfortunate family members or the occasional neighbor who looked at him funny. No. Stewie's got his sights set on bigger game. We're talking entire continents here, folks. Remember that little incident in Copenhagen? Yeah, that was just the warm-up act. Now, I'm no psychologist, but even I'm scratching my head over this one. Is it nurture? Or is it just pure, unadulterated evil wrapped up in a onesie? The experts are just as baffled. One shrink I talked to said, and I quote, "In all my years of studying child psychology, I've never seen a case quite like this. It's as if he skipped the terrible twos and went straight to terrifying thousands." But let's talk numbers for a second, because when it comes to Stewie's victims, we're not just counting bodies, we're counting populations. This kid's got a kill list longer than the line at a Black Friday sale. And trust me, you do not want to be on it. Now, I know what you're thinking. Surely someone's noticed all these bodies piling up, right? Well, you'd be surprised. Lois Griffin, mother of the year that she is, seems more concerned with finding Stewie's binky than the corpses he's stashing under his crib. Talk about selective vision. But the FBI, they're not so easily fooled. Word on the street is their most wanted list now includes a baby photo. And let me tell you, it's the cutest little mugshot you've ever seen. Who knew evil could look so adorable in footy pajamas? As for the final tally, well, let's just say, if Stewie were to face justice for his crimes, he'd be looking at more life sentences than there are stars in the sky. We're talking multiple life sentences, times a million, and that's being conservative. But here's the kicker. How exactly do you put a baby on trial? I mean, can you imagine the scene in the courtroom? All rise for the honorable judge. Oh wait, the defendant needs a diaper change. It's a legal nightmare that would make even the most seasoned lawyers throw up their hands in despair. And let's not forget the psychological aspect of all this. Stewie's character raises some pretty heavy questions about the nature of evil. Is a baby born bad, or does it take a village to raise a psychopath? It's the kind of nature versus nurture debate that keeps philosophy professors up at night. Real-life cases of children committing violent acts often highlight the complexities of child psychology and the influence of their environment. But Stewie, he takes it to a whole new level. We're not talking about a kid who pushed another kid off the swing set. We're talking about a baby who's single-handedly responsible for more carnage than most dictators. So what does this all mean for our pint-sized psychopath? Well, if we're applying real-world logic to this fictional nightmare, Stewie's looking at some serious time. Rhode Island law states that individuals convicted of multiple homicides can face severe penalties, including life imprisonment. And let's face it, Stewie's got enough homicides under his belt to fill a small country's worth of prisons. But here's the thing. Stewie's not just any killer. He's a criminal mastermind, trapped in a body that still needs help going potty. It's like someone took the brain of a supervillain and stuffed it into a Gerber baby. The result? A toddler terror that's got law enforcement scratching their heads and reaching for the baby wipes.